There are two very plausible and legitimate criticisms, and I've tried to address both. One was brought up by Megyn Kelly, and it was basically this. Where do the ballots come from? So, in other words, we know that they come from the nonprofits, but where do the nonprofits get them?
Yep.
Are these legal votes that are being delivered in an illegal way, or are these fraudulent and illegal votes in the first place that are also being delivered in a fraudulent way?
You believe that there are way more than 2,000 mules, but you were just focusing on this group that had this very sort of high threshold. And as you show in the movie, I mean, a lot of these people that were repeatedly going to these drop boxes, they look like transients or almost homeless people. A lot of them, they're showing up at 4 a.m. and 7 a.m. They kind of look disheveled. In other words, they don't look like sort of the upstanding citizen that's doing their due service for the country because they've collected some ballots for, some people that can't, drop the ballots off themselves. It doesn't come off exactly like that.
Exactly. Now, in the 5 states that we look at, which is Georgia, Arizona, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, you don't have the kind of liberal vote harvesting where you can give your ballot to anyone and have them drop it off. That is the case, by the way, in California. But even in California, you can't pay people to deliver ballots. I can't say to my neighbor, go drop off my ballot and here's $50, because the moment money comes in, there's bribery. Essentially, the vote is contaminated. And even a legal vote becomes illegal when money changes hands. Now, in places like Georgia and Arizona, you can only give your ballot to an immediate family member, or if you're confined, to a caregiver. That's it. And I think you can see this is the power of the video. The second line of evidence in the movie is you begin to see not just cell phone devices moving from one Dropbox to another, but you actually get to see the mules. And I think it's very telling because when you see a guy jump out of a car, it's 3 a.m, he looks left and right, make sure no one's looking at him. It has all the hallmarks to any observer that this is an illicit and nefarious operation being conducted under cover of night.
Okay, so even for someone that hasn't seen the movie yet, they're hearing you, they're going, okay, so let's get this straight. These guys have the phones, we're tracking these people, they're showing up repeatedly, they look kind of shady, you've got video. Now, some of them are wearing masks because it was also during COVID or they were disguising themselves, but a bunch of them you can see their faces. So clearly we can figure out who these people are. So what kind of work have you done or is ongoing to figure out who they are? And I guess the real question is, who paid them?
Right. So when you see these mules operating, you see that they stop at organizations, and that's where they get the ballots. So the mules don't come up with their own ballots. They go to what we call vote stash houses. And what are they? Well, they turn out to be kind of far left organizations deeply embedded in the inner city, places like Atlanta, Philadelphia, Detroit, and so on. So they go to these places, they get the ballots, and then
to be clear though, because you actually show the map in the movie, you show them actually going to these places before they're doing the drop-off, actually.
Yeah, not only that, but once they go to 3 or 4 drop boxes, they need to get more ballots. So they go right back to the organization, sort of replenish, and then they continue. Now, it's important to say why they do this, because you'd think, wait a minute, if a mule is dumping 300 ballots, why don't you go to one drop box and just unload them, save yourself a whole bunch of trouble? Well, the reason is that the next morning, the election officials open these drop boxes, and let's say the typical drop box has like 80 ballots, and then this one drop box has like 700 ballots, you'd know right away something is up. So the mules are instructed not to do that. They drop 5 ballots here, 8 ballots there. That's why they go on these routes, and that, of course, makes them easier to track. The reason the True the Votes research, I think, is so powerful here is they set such a high bar. 10 or more drop boxes. Because see, let's say that they had set a bar of 2 drop boxes. Now, nobody has a reason to go to 2. Even if you have your family members' ballots, you're going to go put them in one drop box. But some guy was going to come forward and say, well, you know what? I put my ballots in the first box. I had to tie my shoe at the second box. So you're calling me a mule. I'm not a mule. So instead of all this nonsense, set a bar of 10 or more drop boxes. Let's remember that this isn't the post office. This isn't where you go to drop your bills off. These are only for ballots. There's no other reason to go to these drop boxes other than to dump ballots. And why would you go to 10 or more drop boxes unless you were stuffing them with ballots? So that's the sort of technological reasoning behind the power of the geo-tracking evidence. Now, I wish we had more video, but True the Vote does have 4 million minutes of video. So they have a lot, but unfortunately, a lot of drop boxes don't have video.
Right. So are they going through more video now? Because you have some people, you have their faces. I mean, have they been doing any work to track these people? Do you know where any of these people are? I mean, again, a lot of them sort of seem like transients or just probably unidentifiable for one reason or another, but there's got to be some way to get some of them, right?
Well, here's the key point. I mean, obviously, you're right. Some of these mules are visible. You can see their face and they can be recognized that way. But the more important thing is that True the Vote has the cell phone IDs of all the mules, all the 2,000 mules. So when you track a cell phone, each cell phone has a unique kind of digital fingerprint, the cell phone ID. Each cell phone has only one ID. And it's about as good technologically as having, a human fingerprint or even human DNA. It has the same degree of reliability. Now, interestingly, True the Vote doesn't have the names of these mules, but law enforcement, they unmask these cell phones all the time. So unmasking simply means you go to a judge, you say, hey, listen, I've got these guys at 10 or more drop boxes, so I have probable cause. The judge goes, here's a warrant. You go to the cell phone provider, they give you the names of all the mules, and then you go interview them, who paid you, who put you up to it, and so on.
So where are you at in that process?
So where we are is that True the Vote has been working hard with the state of Georgia, but there's a very subtle and complex investigation, and it's not clear that the Secretary of State, Raffensperger, who's leading this investigation, is trying to push it forward or hold it back. He's involved in a very complex politics inside of Georgia. Now, in Yuma County, Arizona, the sheriff just announced, unknown to us, that there's a new investigation into criminal ballot trafficking in Yuma. And this is, of course, important because in the movie, we interview a mule. Where is she from? San Luis, inside of Yuma County. True the Vote has done work in Yuma for months. So while the sheriff goes, I'm not doing it because of a movie, and frankly, we wouldn't want him to say any differently, here is a guy who has been checking into this. And in a sense, it provides a certain independent validation that this is a legitimate issue. This kind of ballot trafficking does go on, and it is a crime. What
has been sort of what you would say is the most legit criticism of the movie that you've seen? I've seen a lot of just sort of, oh, here's Dinesh peddling the big lie. Actually, like a minute before we connected on Skype, I saw that you tweeted out, it was a criticism from, I think it was like a former FBI guy who basically just said, oh, Dinesh's big lie movie is going to the theaters, but there's no criticism of the movie. It's just sort of this blanket criticism. But I'm sure you've heard some things that have brought up issues or maybe things that you wish you addressed, et cetera.
There are two very plausible and legitimate criticisms, and I've tried to address both. One was brought up by Megyn Kelly, and it was basically this. Where do the ballots come from? So in other words, we know that they come from the nonprofits, but where do the nonprofits get them? Are these legal votes that are being delivered in an illegal way, or are these fraudulent and illegal votes in the first place that are also being delivered in a fraudulent way?
So and Dennis sort of brings that up in the movie, doesn't he, as well?
Yeah, we address this directly in the movie. And what we say is, in a sense, we cannot know for sure because we're tracking the ballot from the drop box back. And we know the origination point is the nonprofit. So we know the nonprofits are paying the mules. Now, where do the nonprofits get the ballots? Now, the problem here is this. I cannot think. If you were talking about 100 ballots, I could say, well, you know what? Some nonprofit went through a housing complex. They collected everybody's ballot. But we're talking about hundreds of thousands of ballots being collected in 5 separate states. So I say to myself, what is the plausible scenario of a legal voter, say Dave Rubin or Dinesh, saying, you know what, I'm feeling a little lazy today. I don't want to go down to the mail and drop box. I'm going to go to a left-wing nonprofit in the inner city, give them my lawful ballot so they can hire a mule to go in the middle of the night wearing gloves and take photos of the ballots going in. It makes no sense. So I cannot think of any plausible way for these to be all legal ballots. So my guess is it's a mixture of legal and illegal ballots, but all these ballots are rendered fraudulent by the simple fact that the mules are being paid, and that paid ballot trafficking is illegal in all 50 states.
If you're looking for more honest and thoughtful conversations about politics instead of nonstop yelling, check out our politics playlist. And if you want to watch full interviews on a variety of topics, watch our full episode playlist all right over here. And to get notified of all future videos, be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell.